You're good to go.
All right, good morning. I'm assuming you can hear me. All right, excellent. Well, welcome to this presentation on the art of shaping the win, how to gain a competitive edge in procurement. I'm Steve Wilburn. I manage AWS's worldwide public sector business development and capture organization focused on the U.S. federal sector. And that encompasses federal civilian, DoD, national security, and non-government organizations like the United Nations and the World Bank. I have a team that focuses on each of those verticals. And with me today,
I'm David DeBrant, and I'm Steve's counterpart. I head up a business development and capture team. I'm focused on everything outside the United States. So probably we've got folks in about 15 countries around the world, sort of the same setup as Steve, either on verticals or on whole countries.
So Dave and I have each done this job for, in my case, almost 4 years, in his case, about 6 years. So what we're going to do today is just have an informal exchange of sharing information with you about best practices on how to work with Amazon, either as a consulting partner or as a technology partner who is pursuing contracts in the public sector. So this is the silent disco format. Unfortunately, you can't ask questions of us either during or at the end of this presentation. However, there is a Meet the Speaker staging area right outside the doors after this event. Dave and I will be there. We also have Jane Lacey and her partner management team who's going to be out there to meet you. And I have several members of my capture team and some members of Dave's that are going to join us outside if you'd like to come out and meet us or ask us any questions that are prompted by this discussion. All right, so let's go through the agenda. I'm going to first start by talking about exactly what we mean by bid management at AWS. And then we're going to set the stage for the broader discussion by talking about what has changed with our customers over the last 4 to 5 years, and then what has changed with AWS over that same period of time, and then what that means for interacting with our end customers and for our interactions and support to our partner community. Then we're going to talk about best practices for leveraging our bid management team, and we'll share a couple of examples both from the United States and from the global market. So before I go any further, I would just like to get a sense, we would like to get a sense of who's in the audience. Could I just see a brief show of hands for how many of you are already representatives of a registered AWS APN partner? That's excellent. How many of you are thinking of registering as an AWS partner? There's a few. All right, well, hopefully this presentation will help encourage you to take that step. How many of you represent a focus on the U.S. federal government as opposed to state and local? So federal government first, big focus. How about state and local? Okay, there's quite a few of you.
And anybody looking at international? Anybody have a part of the organization doing international?
Yeah,
okay,
quite a few
people,
over there.
good.
All right, excellent. All right, that gives us a sense of who's in the audience today.
One more question. Anybody from government or government procurement here? Okay.
No one at all from government? Okay. We sometimes do have people visiting us from the government side. So what do we mean by bid management at AWS? Well, our bid management team encompasses business development. Think of everything left of an RFI or a market survey, a request for information, everything left of that, all the shaping activity that happens before a market survey or a request for information or a draft RFP is released. We'll talk a little bit more about that. It also encompasses capture, everything that happens in the sense of developing pipeline and then responding to RFIs and market surveys, responding to draft RFPs, and then actually developing a proposal. And then the third is the proposal phase itself. You've got the final RFP in hand and you're actually developing that. So we're talking about 3 different selling motions. Our teams cover all 3 of those selling motions, and the way you interact with us varies somewhat between those. If you think about the business development function as us actually interacting pretty regularly with our federal customers as they're thinking through their acquisition strategies. As you can imagine, our government customers have come a long way, but many of them are doing their first major cloud acquisition, and they're looking for pretty intense interaction with the major cloud providers and the system integrators who provide the migration services for those clouds. they're looking to talk to us about their acquisition strategy. They want to know the best practices. They want to know the difference between a FAR Part 12 acquisition, for example, and the more traditional system integrator acquisitions that they're often more used to. So it's a little bit of a new motion for them. So we spend a lot of time, I spend hours with our government customers talking about those, and so do many members of our team. We also represent AWS at a lot of industry groups. A lot of you guys are there. You know the types of groups I'm talking about. We are out there intermingling with government customers at those industry events. We're out there intermingling with you. We're really trying to learn where industry is going, where government is going. What are the major buying trends going on in the government at any given time? What do we need to know about that? With respect to capture, we meet regularly with our partners to discuss their AWS relevant pipelines. We want to talk with them about our pipeline priorities and where there's an intersection between the two and how we can work best together. We're really out there to help them validate customer needs because they're meeting with customers, we're meeting with customers. We're putting those two discussions together and making sure that we're properly aligned. We also are responsible inside of AWS for making sure that when we have to bid directly, that we have the right partnering strategy in place. But when we're supporting our partners, we often do matchmaking in support of our partner bids, where you're looking for niche capabilities and you're asking us to help facilitate that by introducing you to people in our companies inside of our partner network who have those capabilities, that expertise. We also support during the capture phase actual solutioning activities. So a lot of our partners who are pursuing bids really look to AWS to help them with those solutions. So it's very difficult for a lot of our partners to get entry points into AWS for some bids. So those who have a partner manager, they know that that's their entry point. The partner managers know who on the AWS BD capture side is leading specific bids, and they can put you in touch with us. We then in turn provide the outreach across the broader AWS, meaning we can put you in touch with the right solution architects who know the customer and the challenge that a particular procurement is trying to address. We also have access to the service teams where that's needed. You're able to interact with people around specific services that we offer and the developments of those services, the evolution of their capabilities, the evolution of features, and what that means in terms of what you could bid with these capabilities. We also provide the liaison into our proposal teams. So these are the people who will help you with white papers as needed. If you're trying to develop a proposal around a specific capability that you want an AWS story around that. So we help build partner packages for you. We offer those on a variety of bids throughout the year. And we also, go ahead. We also support Q&A sessions. So look, it is something we like doing. We want to make ourselves available to our partners. Sometimes you just want to get together and have a discussion about what you're thinking of doing, and you want to discuss best practices, how we view a particular procurement, how we would approach it, and make those recommendations to you as you get started.
So, and one other thing at a high level I think to keep in mind is, adopting cloud. This is a journey, and this is a real cultural shift. So this team, we're also sort of on the vanguard of helping to do that shift. This is with the finance folks, this is with the procurement folks, the legal folks, the contracts folks. So we're doing as much education around how this works. And our ultimate goal out of all this, all of these pieces, is so people can access and get access the benefits of the cloud effectively. Using traditional approaches tends to slow it down a little bit. So our team is there to do that. So it's a cultural push at the highest level.
Good. So let's talk for a moment about what has changed with our customers over the last 4 to 5 years. Well, according to Bloomberg Government in 2018, our federal customers spent $6.5 billion on commercial cloud services. Federal civilian sector represented about $4.4 billion of that, DoD about $2 billion of that. It was a 32% increase over 2017. We expect those trends to continue. There was also a survey of state CIOs. 82% of them cited commercial cloud as a budget priority. So we expect those growth trends to continue, and we see it in the types of procurement activities that these federal government customers and even state and local CIOs are pushing out to the market. We've also seen that these customers are moving well beyond what they were doing 4 and 5 years ago, which was hosting web applications, hosting websites. These customers are now moving into mission workloads, enterprise systems. And to do that, they're using more advanced AWS services, like serverless, AWS Lambda, serverless computing. They're able to reduce costs significantly by using those services where they can. They're also getting very sophisticated in the use of reserved instances and even the spot market where they're working outside of classified regions. So they're taking migration well beyond lift and shift. They're optimizing their workloads by replatforming and refactoring them. There's real culture of innovation among our customers. They've got more sophisticated users. Many of our government customers, just like our partners, have obtained certifications. They've developed real competency around our services. Thousands of them, tens of thousands, go to reInvent every year. They're very eager to see the new services and features that are announced. And they're making use of those services in mission workloads. They're also putting together more strategic procurements where they're not looking at just specific programs, but they're looking at the enterprise level and looking at ways to economize at the enterprise level, leverage repeatable capabilities and systems and processes across their enterprise. So they're looking to build cloud vehicles, cloud contracts that reflect the need to move at scale across the enterprise. So what has changed with AWS over the last 4 or 5 years? Well, in 2014, at reInvent, we launched 516 new services or service features. By 2018, we had launched 1,957 new services or service features. That pace of innovation we expect to continue. For our partners, that represents an opportunity to embrace these new technologies, to understand what they mean for our customers, but also to realize that those customers are very heavily reliant upon the APN network and our partners' capabilities. Industry tells us all the time as they look at these acquisition strategies that they're buying cloud, but they're buying services as well. Government cannot do this on their own, which is why we put so much emphasis on our partner community and on our competency programs. Government talks to us a lot about how to structure not just the cloud buy, but how to structure the acquisition of the expertise they need to migrate their workloads and to operate them in the cloud.
And one thing I'll add to this is where we need partners' help to get this message across about how they access this innovation. A traditional methodology will sort of stifle that innovation, or a traditional procurement approach, traditional contracting approach will tend to, we'll add those as we want to add them or when these windows open. And we want people to add and be able to access them right away as they're coming out. And so we see contracts around that. So what we want to do is work with partners to talk through that story. And this is why it's so important for us to understand this, but for you to understand that and bring that out as well.
So again, along the theme of what has changed with AWS, at the end of 2014, AWS had 11 regions worldwide, including 1 GovCloud region. We had 28 availability zones and 53 edge locations. By 2019, we had 21 regions worldwide. These are commercial regions. If we include the secret region and the top secret region, we actually have 23 regions worldwide. We have 66 availability zones and 180 points of presence in 68 cities across 29 different countries. That represents an incredible global reach, but it also represents an incredible opportunity for our public sector partners. What has changed with AWS and where are we investing? Well, to keep up with the kind of growth we just talked about and the expansion of our global infrastructure, we've had to continue investing in business development and capture. We now have technical business development that specializes in areas like IoT and machine learning. We've grown our solution architect cadre. We're able to focus those solution architects on individual markets, dividing that down so that they specialize even in individual agencies and knowing their markets very deeply. We also have Envision Engineering, where we will take a customer-specific challenge set and we will develop a solution, often in partnership with our partners, to demonstrate the art of the possible. You can imagine how compelling that is to be engaged with us that early so that you're building that solution ahead of an actual RFP, what the government's actually going to end up buying. In the training area, we continue to increase and grow our certification programs. My own business development and capture team now has twice as many certifications as we had when we started. We think it's important to build those certifications into our team. We've grown our partner competency programs. As many of you probably know, we have a public sector partner program where we're able to host on our public website for government consumption which of our partners actually are competent to work in the public sector and what do they specialize in. The partner competency is a demonstrable way to show to the government that you understand their security requirements. Those in the federal sector like FedRAMP, and those potentially in the DoD sector if that's your market focus. It really is a stamp, not so much of approval, it's a stamp of capability for our partners to have those certifications and partner competencies. So we encourage you to continue gaining those capabilities.
And governments are also starting to write RFPs and build buying mechanisms that actually separate out vendors with these certifications. That's something that's starting to be shown in the US, I think, and around the world as a way to, so something that partners need to be looking at as they continue to go into the market.
That's true. I will tell you that with all the interactions we have with the federal government, I have heard personally several times the frustration among our government customers that they can't get their legacy system integrators to move fast enough. The technology vendors tend to be out there. The system integrators, for some customers, tend to be slow followers and not able to move as quickly as the customer wants. It's a real challenge for us. It's one of the reasons we've had to build our solution architect cadre. So we encourage you once again, you know, the time of skepticism around commercial cloud, where a lot of system integrators were walking into customers and saying, you know, we need to go slowly, we need to think about what this is. We're pretty much beyond those days. Our customers continue to express frustration that they need partners who can move quickly. We have seen our small to mid-size integrators really make names for themselves among many of our partners for being able to do that. So again, it is kind of a new day where customers are well beyond simply hosting web pages. They're looking at those mission workloads and they're looking for partners who can take them there.
And I think another thing we can also bring is Steve, my team, the state and local team, we're connected to a lot of different partners around the world and governments doing very innovative things. And so helping you connect what other people have done or understanding what other people have done is something you can take advantage of us as well.
So what do these changes mean for our end customers and our partners? So we looked at sort of the growth in the market. We looked at growth in AWS's capabilities. What does all of this mean? Well, what it means is that we are engaged with customers in a way we never have been before in terms of not just their immediate needs, but their long-term needs. We are helping them to build their near-term and their long-term cloud strategies. We're looking at hybrid strategies, not something that I was that involved with in my first year or two here, but our government customers are very clear that they want to move some things to the cloud, but some things they're not ready to move to the cloud. So we and our partners have to become much more fluent in what hybrid architectures look like and how they can work. We need to be able to help our customers think through what is immediately ready to go into the cloud versus those things that are going to take a little bit longer due to the need to re-engineer those workloads to work in the cloud. We're very deeply involved with the government to tailor their governance models and to help them think through their compliance needs. And we're helping them by advising them on new services and aligning our technologies with their cloud strategies. We spend a lot of time talking with customers about exactly how to structure their contracts. In the world of commercial cloud, we're looking for commerciality as much as possible, firm fixed price contracts. These are not legacy system integrator, level of effort, time and material type contracts. We encourage our customers to, when they have longer term migration needs, to really set up the level of effort type contracts focused on our partner community, not on AWS. We want to stay focused on the firm fixed price, FAR Part 12, commercial item acquisitions, but we have to help our customers understand the difference between those two procurement models because again, it's new to many of them. We're also finding that more and more of our customers are looking for direct contractual relationships with AWS. When I first started, everything we did was behind our partners. Today, the government wants to do both. They want to do some things through some of our partner community, but they also want direct relationships with AWS. It started with our C2S contract with the intelligence community, but those of you who follow the DoD market know that the DoD is doing something similar. The important thing I want you to keep in mind as a partner of ours is that even when AWS goes direct, we bring our partners with us, either directly as teaming partners or indirectly by creating that draft behind the sale of the cloud services, creating the opportunities for the migration services, because we're not going to do that. We're still heavily reliant on our partner community to help the customers with those migrations. So we are bidding some contracts direct. There's a lot of activity in the DoD space. If you're familiar with what other transactional authority acquisitions are, in those cases, we may bid direct and our partners bid direct on the same things. We encourage that. So we're asking our partners to be comfortable with the shift in the government buying patterns, because there are going to be times when we have to go direct. When we go direct, we're reflecting the capabilities of our Amazon partner network, even if we're not explicitly signing a teaming agreement with you, which is not always necessary. We are representing that partner network in that direct bid.
And I can talk about in the United Kingdom, there's a contract called G-Cloud. Very successful contract, it's been around probably 7 years. They actually were a vanguard in putting together a cloud buying mechanism. And that contract is us direct, as well as I think we're at 200 partners who are involved in that contract at all different levels, providing a whole level of different sort of managed services, solutions, consulting, training, et cetera. And it works very well. So we sometimes see partners get word about that direct discussion, and we can tell you by practice that it works well.
So one of the things we want to encourage is that if you hear we are bidding directly, government will say it at industry days, for example, that we're looking for a direct relationship with hyperscale cloud providers. You should not be reluctant, if it is a multi-bid situation, to put your own bid together. Let's say you're a reseller. In some cases, the government wants both. Some of the OTAs, both. We supported partner bids. In fact, we were named as partners in their bids at the same time that we were bidding and naming some of those partners in our bids. You should expect more of that to happen in the future. Feel free to reach out to us through your partner manager, or if you have a relationship with capture managers you've worked with before, you should reach out directly to us and talk about what we're seeing and what we're willing to offer in terms of support to you on those bids. There have been times when we can't scale to meet all of the demand of partner support that we face. We ask you to be patient with that as we build out our teams. It's a very specialized capability that our teams represent. Our teams are in great demand. So sometimes we have to decline a support request only because we can't scale to it at that particular time, not because we don't want to provide it. But there's usually an ability to support you in some ways, even if it's only providing a best practices paper or some type of partner package, if we can't provide direct hands-on support to you. All right, what do these changes mean in terms of partner support? Well, we've seen our partners continue to advance their expertise and differentiate themselves. They're building out their capabilities, their certifications, their competencies, and every year we launch new partner programs. We'll show later some other sessions that you can attend to learn more about that. On the public policy side, I just wanted to indicate here that AWS is very active on the public policy side of things. You know, congressmen don't know a lot about cloud. Their staffs are learning about cloud today. There are very few who have tracked this in depth until fairly recently. So our public policy teams are out every day helping to educate the Hill, the staff, the congressmen themselves on what commercial cloud is and the opportunity it represents. And we're partnering with a lot of industry associations who are playing that same role. So we do have a public policy team that provides that outreach.
And so we're doing the same thing around the world, and it's interesting seeing how they're trailing off the U.S. federal government approach. Some of the policies that have been put in place here. And then there's also policies out there, some cloud-first policies and other policies they put in place that are actually leaders. And so I guess I have a bias towards the international market, but if you're interested in what other countries are doing too, because there are lessons learned that can come back here as well. So we're happy to help with that.
During the last couple of years, you've seen some industry advisory groups putting together white papers of recommendations for Congress. We're actively involved with those. When those are underway, we encourage you to reach out to us through your partner managers or directed to our capture team, who is working with our proposal staff to put our own recommendations forward. We love to have those discussions and think about where our recommendations can reinforce one another. Okay. Should we talk to this?
Oh, is this mine? Okay, good. All right, so we want to talk about some of the best practices around working with capture. First and foremost, it's engage early. I can't tell you having an RFP thrown in, and so let's talk about this RFP, it's due in 2 weeks, and we've got these 15 issues and those kinds of things. I call it RFX rescue. We're trying to rescue an RFP and try to work with that. It's a difficult way to work, and we can do that, and we've done that plenty of times, but what we found the most effective way to do this is actually to sit down with a capture team, whether it's US federal or in an international, in a country, or wherever it is, state and local, to sit down in advance and say, we're interested in this. This is what we're doing. And what we kind of want to do a little bit too is teach you. If you haven't done it before, haven't done the procurement and haven't worked through it, we can teach you some of the lessons that are there and some of the ways to talk to government and understanding those pieces. And bring best practices in. We'll let you take the lead on that as we go forward. So some simple ways to do this are starting to build out a relationship. Talk about pipeline. What are you working on? What are we working on? How can we share that information? Talking about strategies. And this is where the advanced discussions happen. If you build out a strategy together, you're going to be in better shape going forward. We talk about solution discussions, building out partnerships with other vendors. And one thing, again, I'm going to do a little cheerlead for the international market is there are vendors trying to solve solutions overseas right now that could use a piece of something in the US, or somebody's doing that here. So it's something to keep an eye. I see this happen crossing the border into Canada. That's a very easy one. But other places in the world, this is happening. These solutions can be run anywhere and people can use them. So there are 3 types of partners we typically work with. There's obviously, Steve mentioned, the traditional system integrator, the big consulting firms. And it's interesting for me to see how that evolution has happened. Sometimes, as Steve said, it can be a little bit slow. There's a little bit of them figuring out this market, but there's others that have moved very quickly or created pockets within the organization that have become experts at this and are pushing even within their own organizations to do that. And so I think one thing that we can help with is tapping that type of organization, finding those pieces. We actually have people who know where this company is working and where that expertise is, and so we can work through that. Technology partners, these are the solutions, and that's ultimately what government wants. Government wants solutions. We go in and start talking EC2 with a government, sometimes they kind of look at us funny. They want to understand how I'm going to help a citizen, and really, I keep that in mind all the time of how we're doing that. And so, us being able to bring that solution in and showing where solutions run on the cloud effectively, something that we can talk to and work with you on that. Again, going across different agencies. We've done it one, let's go together in another place and do the same thing. Finally, the resellers. Anybody a reseller here? Okay, so reselling with cloud it's a little bit different than traditional reselling. And one thing we can help with, and I do this quite often, is we have to sit down with a government agency and a reseller and talk about how this works and what the advantages of this are and why we do it this way and some of the specialty of it. Because if a government tries to do it in a traditional manner, it can be difficult. So doing that in advance and understanding how a reseller can step in and be that partner with us going into a government is critical. And they provide that option on a contract. Sometimes like overseas for us, we have currency issues. Sometimes they can step in and do that. So there's a lot of roles where resellers can step in and do that. So work with us to understand what those roles are. Anything you want to add?
Not on that one, I think.
Okay. So this is where I spend a lot of time, our team spends a lot of time, is just how do I buy cloud? This is the cultural shift that I talked about earlier. This is a real shift in thinking. Again, you have procurement people who are typically not the biggest fans of changing the way they do things. You got folks who've been buying the same way for 30 years. It's very difficult to shift that. Finance, legal folks. Really, you're shifting out of to a commercial approach rather than, hey, here are these terms and conditions are great. So there's kind of 3 areas that we focus on when we have these discussions. First, it's around the service agreements, how you use AWS services. And I think a critical part, and this is something up front you have to tell everybody, This is the same set of services that a kid who's keeping track of football scores on an S3 bucket versus a secret region where they're doing the most advanced things that are out there. It's the same thing. And we're in a situation with the government where they start putting their prescriptive little elements in. And one of their elements was the doors need to be this thick in the data center. And we were a millimeter off. That was actually a stopper for a little while, a millimeter off on a little thing. And so these are the kind of things that we want to work through and understand that commercial nature. Pricing. Understanding the nature of AWS pricing. First, this is pricing that we've reduced, I think, 72 times, I think we're at right now.
Yes.
And we do this as the flywheel continues. We get to a point, hey, this works, we'll lower the price, and we've done that. Understanding how government can access that and utilize that. You don't have to go in with the traditional approach on it. It's also, we just had conversations about this recently where here's how we want the pricing to be set up. Here's our box, put it in. We can't change our pricing for each deal. Our pricing is our pricing, and that's a big shift that we need partners to help describe that story. Or if a government needs to do that, or a customer needs it that way, it could be a budget reason, whatever, you can step in that role and do that. Partners have an incredible amount of flexibility, and we've seen some partners do some really innovative things to be a layer in between. We're sort of the Home Depot. You're doing the contracting work, and you can charge the way you want. Finally, the service terms, and we talked about innovation earlier with Steve. Making sure people can access this, the speed, and allowing a contract to absorb these new things. I mean, I was talking to a customer not too long ago, and they're like, "How do we build a catalog of your stuff? And how do we do this? How do we update it? How do we do these things?" And I just said, "Why don't you just use the online piece? Just use the online catalog, and that's it. It just updates itself, it refreshes, it's commercially available. You're protected in a sense by that." So we need to get that discussion across to partners as well. Partners need to be adept at doing that, and we're happy to help with that discussion. I love going in with a partner and having that discussion with the government to go through those things.
Yeah, it is a real challenge when customers want to buy commercial cloud, but they want to then tell us what the standardized terms need to change to in order for them to buy it, and how we need to change the service level agreements and the service terms. And so it is really an education process. Once we start going down that path, it's no longer really a commercial service. So it's been quite an education process.
I'll add one more thing about legal too, is I've learned the discussion has to be about why. Why do the terms work this way? I've gotten pretty good at it. Our legal can do it. I think as a partner, you need to understand that as well. Just why does it work this way? And kind of walk through each of the steps and get adept at doing that discussion. Because I've learned when they hear that discussion on the why, it makes sense. You understand it, but you have to be able to do that. Otherwise, you get caught up in this, all right, partner, we're going to bid with you, but we're going to flow these terms down to AWS that can't be done. And all of a sudden, we're in this big mire of trying to figure this thing out. That why conversation is really important. It's actually, at the core of it, it's quite simple. So we're happy to help with that discussion as well.
It's also why the early discussions with the government are so important, because once you're in that discussion that Dave described, you're kind of late, right? We should have been able to avoid that with all of the earlier shaping discussions so that they understand what buying commercial cloud services actually is. There we go.
Okay, so best practices. First, we've got cloud frameworks. I even take a step back and say buying mechanisms. We need to work with government, and we're doing this around the world, to help them understand the most effective way to buy cloud. In a sense, the raw cloud, then buy the services. I have the conversation over and over again where you want to buy cloud, that's great. We can be involved directly or indirectly, but you need to bring in partners into this mix too, and here's why. Scalability, your organization can't do it, we can't do it. You need this network of these experts who can come in and help, because you never know where you're going to go with the cloud. And so we need to have that, partners need to have the same discussion too, is to say, you need to create this. The best contract is actually an open contract where partners can join easily and be part of it. And we've seen some governments do that as well. So understanding these buying mechanisms, and we found out some pretty innovative ways people have done it. I mentioned the UKG cloud contract. That is really just a bar they get on. We have other ones where it's a refresh of 1 year, or very simple, here's the catalog, we'll figure out the terms later. So there's different ways to do this, and I think it's important to try to understand some of those best practices that are out there. We've talked about terms and conditions. Just again, don't be afraid to talk about our customer agreement and how that works with folks and how we fit in with that, and start with a very simple discussion around that. And again, the why discussion. Utility pricing, I'm going to go on a little side note about working with the finance folks. And it's very interesting when they start seeing the utility pricing, and I don't know if this is true in federal, Steve, I'm pretty far away from it now, but they get very nervous. Oh, this is going to go up. But where the discussion starts to flip around is, this is the savings, and this is what happens, and the flexibility and the visibility, I think, is the most important part, is you have full visibility if you use this. So, and a partner can provide, using our tools or the tools that they've got on top and the solution they've got on top, to provide that visibility about what's going on. And finally, resellers. Again, that's a part of the process. And I'll throw about resellers. Again, there's a few people that are resellers in there. I think it's a nice to have. Building a business around that is a long discussion. I think it's the solution piece that people need to focus on as they go into the cloud.
So it is amazing to us the number of customer discussions we have where it's very obvious that those customers have been burned by vendor lock-in, and they're still getting their head around the pay-as-you-go model of AWS and commercial cloud, where we don't lock customers into long-term contracts, where they have the option to pay as you go. They also have the option to use reserved instances and experience deep discounts doing that. We have other models where we have tiered pricing. So as you put together a bid, it's good to engage with us to talk about those options. We do sit down. Sometimes something as fundamental as going over the cost calculator for the solution you developed to make sure there isn't something that you missed. I don't think I've ever been in one of those situations where we didn't come out with a more efficient architecture than we started with, that the partner had developed on their own. Our solution architects do this thing every day. They're up to date on all of our services and feature updates, and we're almost always able to take cost out of a solution without affecting performance, the technical performance. We're often able to enhance the technical solution and still get costs down. But it's important to also discuss the options customers have in terms of pricing models. So it's good to stay in touch with us on those and to think that through as you put together your bids. So I'm not able to disclose the exact customer on this, but I wanted to just talk just loosely about a case study where we had a large federal agency with many different components that decided the day had come that they needed to recapitalize the data center or they needed to move to the cloud. A very large, multi-hundreds of millions of dollars of data center expenses each year. They made the decision to do a top-down assessment of that to figure out what needed to stay on-prem and what could move to the commercial cloud. They needed help, even before they issued an RFI, to think through what is their overall workload architecture look like? What things could be lifted and shifted into the cloud if they just had the resources to do it? What needed to be re-platformed? What needed to be refactored? What type of hybrid model could they use on the short to mid-term? And what would things look like after a 5 or 10 year period of time? We engaged with that customer very early and built out a hybrid deployment model, a hybrid architecture model. We even looked at multi-cloud services and how we could partner with a wide range of our partners to build that multi-cloud and manage that multi-cloud environment. We had to bring in partners with very deep security and compliance expertise, match them up with our security and compliance experts, and put together white papers for that customer. This customer was looking at machine learning, and so we needed to educate them on Amazon SageMaker as a platform for building machine learning capabilities. We had to pull forward a number of our unique partner offerings, areas where partners had specialization in each of the scopes, the components of the scope of work. And we used our own Envision engineering capabilities to do some prototyping to show the art of the possible. These things go on for many months. It takes 6 to 9 months to work through these planning sessions with our customers. And in each of those phases, we were also interacting with a wider range of our partners who were also tracking what they knew was going to ultimately become an acquisition or even a set of acquisitions. We helped with the government delineate the types of things they would need on FAR Part 12 type acquisitions. We also helped them to delineate things that they would want to do in a more traditional system integration procurement model. So these types of success stories where we're able to help these customers think through their acquisition strategies, iterate on draft statements of work and draft RFPs, happen all year long at AWS. I would just encourage you not to stop just with your partner manager, but to get to know the capture managers inside of our organization that line up to the accounts that you support, the agencies that you support. Those relationships are very beneficial to you, but they're also very beneficial to us. We don't have perfect situational awareness. We love interacting with our partners who have deep customer expertise, and we want to do that to the benefit of both sides. So what are some of the things that we talked about? What are some of the things we offer to you as partners? We talked about being able to deliver white papers. We have a white paper on just about everything. Many of them are posted and available to you at aws.amazon.com if you know how to look for them. If you don't, you can work with your partner manager or one of our capture managers to find them. If we don't have a white paper on a topic that's important to you, we don't mind being tasked with that. We don't like being tasked, as Dave said, at the last minute. We'd like to get a little bit of heads up on some of your priorities and how we might be able to help you in building those. And between our capture teams and our proposal resources and other specialty teams inside of AWS, we're usually able to pull that together.
And there are also, sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
There are also third-party white papers that are out there. For example, in Europe, there's CISP is an organization that's put out a very extensive white paper on procurement of cloud. So we can point you to these kind of things. And I think actually looking outside even the US, I know a lot of people here are focused in the US, there's some pretty interesting things that we can point you to that are out there that other governments are doing and other organizations are doing too. So again, reach out. We sort of, our ears are on the ground all day long on these kinds of things, and we're happy to point you to them.
So we also talked about offering technical sessions to our partners. My capture team does those. We facilitate many of those with our solution architects. We're very comfortable doing whiteboarding sessions. Again, if you're very early in the process, we're happy to do whiteboarding sessions with you, acknowledging that everyone's getting started and not too far down the road. We don't mind Q&A sessions. It doesn't have to be in person if you're not in town. We do teleconferences all the time with our partners to do that. We love doing in-depth architecture reviews with you. So on the right, you'll see some examples of recent case studies that we've done. There was another one for large-scale data lake concept that the government was contemplating. We built quite an in-depth data lake solution, a shell, if you will, and built a white paper around that and shared it with a number of our partners who basically re-architected what they had been thinking before receiving that paper. They re-architected their own data lake approach to data lake in the cloud as a result of that paper. So we do this type of thing all the time. We encourage you to engage with us to participate in that.
One other thing we've done this a few times, we've actually hooked different governments to talk to each other. So if a government's something unique or different, they love to talk about those things. And a government talking to a government is a much better story or a much better conversation than us or even a partner trying to explain the same thing. So if you get in a situation like that and understand that or reach out to us, we're happy to try to work with you on that.
All right, so we just wanted to point you to some additional sessions that you may want to consider today and tomorrow. So we have laying the groundwork for change. Cloud culture starts at the top. The authority to operate on AWS, compliance as code. In voice of the partner panel discussion, driving innovation and growth as an AWS public sector partner. And then making cloud procurement easy with AWS Marketplace. We encourage you to consider those sessions if you hadn't noticed them in the catalog. And I want to thank you for joining us for this brief session today. Again, Dave and I will be out under the sign outside, as well as some of our capture colleagues and our partner manager colleagues. If you'd like to join us, we'd love to meet you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.